All right. Hey, folks, welcome back to another Demo Day podcast episode. We have Jake and Cody here. Cody is the CTO of Firstloop. Firstloop is a AI first software development agency. I get the honor to be the CEO. And today I will be presenting. We've had Cody presenting the last couple episodes, but today I will be presenting a thumbnail editing agent that I have been working on in some side time over the last couple weeks. All right. And with that, we are pretty much going to jump right in. So up on my screen here on the left, I have a editing canvas for editing an image, creating a thumbnail. On the right, I have a Claude Code instance. We're going to get into the demo in a second, but I want to talk first about why I created this. So Cody and I here at Firstloop, we are creating a lot of content. I'm really marketing content, sharing our learnings, attracting clients, building community. And for YouTube, then we need to create thumbnails. I am not naturally a visually design inclined person. Cody's a lot better at it than I am, but it's definitely not in my skill set. And so I figured Claude would be able to do it better than I could. And as part of this project, then I wanted to create a tool that Claude had first class access to. So I wanted Claude to have an MCP server that plugs right in, and we can edit essentially the same thumbnail together where I can edit, Claude can edit, I can actually just watch Claude edit and create these visual assets that we need in a little bit faster way. The secondary goal of the project, though, was to learn and understand the limitations of Claude Code in a creative endeavor, and also how do we improve a agent in this mode. LLMs are horrible at visual reasoning. They just can't see a layout very well. So where are the shortcomings for the models in this way? And then what's the process for teaching and training a agent to be better at this type of task? That's the overall goal. And to show you how it works currently, we're just going to let Claude Code create a thumbnail here for us. So I have a plain Claude Code instance pulled up in my terminal. This has access, maybe I should show that first. This has access to a MCP server. We have a thumbnail editor and a YouTube. We're not going to really get into the YouTube MCP server today. And I'm just going to tell Claude that you are creating a new thumbnail. And it's Project 11 version 1, just to get it centered on the right piece here. And I'm actually going to enter preview mode on the editor. So in this mode, I have given up my edit controls, and instead Claude Code will edit the thumbnail and it'll push edits to the client. All right, we can see that Claude has kicked off here, getting the version state. It's starting off by creating just a basic background. There's actually a whole second part of the prompt here that I meant to include that I didn't copy paste. So we got thumbnail editing here. Let me exit the preview, refresh this. All right, so you can see we got some really basic editing capabilities here. I'm going to flip back into preview mode and give Claude the rest of the prompt that I meant to. And what I'm asking Claude to create is a thumbnail that says Claude Code created this thumbnail. And I wanted to have a cool computer background. I want to add a gray overlay, which I mistyped. And I want to make the text multicolored. So I just gave Claude a whole bunch of tasks. It's got different tools within an MCP server to make these edits. And now because I started the project wrong, it's also going to have to clean up as well and get rid of some of the initial text. We'll see how it handles that.
So Jake, could you speak a bit about that computer background? You gave it a pretty generic description. Is it pulling those from the internet? Is it generating them? What's exactly happening there?
Yeah, in this case, it is generating them using the latest Gemini model from Google. And so it has this background image generation capability built in. And I'll note that it's also, it's set it as a background, but that's just because of the way it has the image position. We could generate any number of images and have them all placed on here. All right. So first of all, telling it to make the text multicolored, it generated some pretty awful design here. And the background is a little bit gaudy. We don't need 3 monitors, all with IDEs open. So I'm going to continue collaborating with Claude here and ask it to make a few changes. First up, I'm going to say, can you delete all of this text? Make it just a single text box that says Claude Code one-shot this thumbnail. And then I'm going to ask it to also make the background, a little less intense, a little less nerdy. And you can see it's, one by one deleting each of those elements. I created each of those text elements as separate ones to begin with. One thing that I want to call out here is I really like the iterative process where I don't have to manually fiddle with the thumbnail. I can just see the output and be like, I don't like that. And let me just try something else. And Claude Code can just like naturally iterate through it for me.
How many turns will it generally be able to take on its own? Have you kind of pushed it to its limits?
So far, I have not run into a limitation. I've been able to give it a full set of instructions, and the to do management within Claude Code, it just naturally works through it. So there's probably something where if you gave it like really long and really detailed, you might run into limits, but at least out of the box, Claude Code is just so good at managing the to-do list that there hasn't been too much of an issue.
Cool. Yeah, because I think the default is 30 turns that it'll take. And it seems like
Okay.
it's thinking it, and it'll just kind of shut down. I don't even know if it sees it coming or if it just kind of gets kind of pulled on it unexpectedly. But it's
Yeah.
definitely doing, every layer that it's adding is a separate action, and it's doing quite a bit. So it's cool to see
Yeah.
it kind of keep it together throughout all that.
Yeah, let's see. So this is obviously not maybe the best thumbnail, but we're gonna give it one that I haven't done a trial run with. I'm gonna see if it can add another asset on there. So in the repo, I have a Claude Code logo with the background removed, and we're just gonna see if it's able to add it or not. And we'll see if we can remove the text for Claude Code. All right, well we got the first edit done. Fingers crossed for the next one. All right. So it's not too bad. Maybe the background is a little bit bland, and we could continue to iterate on that. It's not a horrible starting point. So from here, I can export. And now I just get this as a full image. And then to close the loop, the reason why I wanted to make this as a tool for myself is, an AI can generate this out of the gate. Let me refresh that. But what I want to be able to do is come in here and edit it afterwards. So like this is too small, but now I can finish the manual edits. And, maybe I need that position down there. This is where I'm not a designer. We can hit save. I can hit refresh, and now this is the thumbnail that we're working with, and I can pass it back to Claude. I could say make that text white or blue or whatever, and it can continue editing with my edits already incorporated.
Yeah, very cool. You can see how you could really quickly just churn out a bunch of different ideas and play with them without going through all the effort of, even just discovering or finding background images that you can use for thumbnails, whether that's dealing with licensing challenges or just finding something that's high quality and is
Yeah,
exactly what you're looking for and works with the text you're trying to put on it. Part in and of itself can take, 15, 30 minutes, depending on how picky you are with what you're looking for. So even to just be able to kind of completely reset the background until you've got something that works with your text is already huge. But this obviously goes a step further with putting text and now, as we can see, importing arbitrary assets as well. Very cool.
yeah. I think like the skill level of Claude and myself is like below a professional thumbnail designer, but the competitive advantage we might be able to get is just speed of like we can go through 10 different iterations. But I would try and demo it, but I'm not sure if it's broken currently. But Claude can also make duplicates of a project and then continue iterating the new duplicate. So if this was a decent starting point, I could say, duplicate this 5 times and let's try each of them. Let's actually try again. We'll let the demo wrap up there, but we'll see if it's able to handle this last request. Oh, there we go. All right, so some bad instructions there. We're just gonna cancel Claude. So when you think about the development of projects like this, something that I've been finding, and I'm still oscillating on a little bit, is I will sometimes create a CLI that interacts with the API first. And that's just because Claude Code can run commands against the CLI directly without having to like restart the MCP instance or restart the MCP server. And so I find that to be a little bit faster of a loop initially, and then I'll just take that API structure and then throw that into an MCP server. But clearly, I've left an artifact here where somewhere in the Claude MD, it's telling it to use a CLI that just actually doesn't exist anymore. So I've not done the complete cleanup there.
Yeah, this is just a demo, so no concerns there. But yeah, that general approach makes sense to me. And again, just goes to show the power of Claude Code kind of out of the box, that you don't need to go through the effort of defining a bunch of custom tools or MCP servers to have it do custom actions for you.
Yep, totally.
Well, cool. As I'm watching this, something that I'm thinking about is creating thumbnails isn't exactly a novel service, I guess you could say. There's a bunch of existing frameworks and tools out there, everything from the most basic, which is just Photoshop. I mean, maybe basic is the wrong word
Yeah.
to use there, but most flexible and least out of the box value, I guess, where you're kind of controlling everything, the canvas, the all the elements that get added. You need a lot of deep knowledge of how that tool works, all the way to tools like I think Canva is one of them. They're just online, in browser experiences where you can kind of drag text around and choose from any number of templates to modify. Can you kind of speak to the big differences here, and maybe even like how could some of those tools, which maybe are a bit far behind in terms of the agent automation experience, what they could learn from what you've built here?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, like, the first thing right out of the gate is if you look at the editing capabilities. Let me go full screen here for a second. You can edit each of these layers, you can set the text, you can set some shadow, but overall, like, the control is very limited. So if you're doing high-end photography editing, like, something like this probably wouldn't work. But thumbnails is the perfect use case where the controls you need are actually, quite limited to get a good output. So that's I think the foundation that makes this, like, a worthwhile project to pursue in the first place. And then the the things that I think are interesting and why somebody might want to use a tool like this, like roll their own, or when this is eventually open sourced, fork it or use it, is you have the ability to train the agent on your own style. I think that's like the first part is the maybe I break it down as like agent human collaboration, training on your own style, and then cost is maybe a third part. But the collaboration between the human and the agent, I think it just has to be baked in from the beginning. Like, I'm sure tools will be able to layer it on. It'll have like a co-pilot where you have something on the sidebar, but giving Claude the exact same level of control that I have, just allows it to do everything. And it's not generating it from templates. It's not editing existing template. Like, it's got full control. And then that sets the foundation for Claude to learn my style over time, where I can say, hey, these are the assets that we have in our library. This is my preferences. We like to have like a professional, clean look, not too clickbaity, but a little bit of clickbait. And I'm able to create that style guideline, and have that baked in either to the Claude MD or a slash command or something, and have it just learn from that over time. And then yeah, like third piece is not super important, but cost, which is this is running with my Claude Code subscription. So I have vibe coded like a SaaS that would replace my Canva subscription or my Photoshop subscription. And all of the intelligence that's baked into it is just something that I'm paying for anyways in my Claude Code subscription.
Yeah, that's very cool. I feel like we're going to start seeing more and more of these very scoped tools, just with how easy it is to build your
Yep.
own. Like you said, you open Photoshop, there's 10,000 settings and then a quadrillion combinations of those settings to create something like a thumbnail is completely overkill. It's kind of the industry standard, I imagine, for a lot of firms and stuff out there that do this work for either YouTubers or even just YouTubers doing it themselves. I remember doing some of this stuff 10 years ago and having to learn how all these tools worked, and it was all very manual and never touched 90% of the buttons of the
Yeah.
tool. So it's interesting to see when you can whip something up like this through vibe coding. You get this very scoped tool that perfectly fits your needs, and that probably helps Claude as well. If you start to think like
But yeah, I didn't even think about that.
what would an MCP server for Photoshop or Adobe Premiere or any of those tools, what would it even look like? And now
Yeah.
Claude potentially is having to chain 10 different tool calls to do one of the things that you did here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Any the way to, like, if I was the product manager of Photoshop, and I'm sure it's a very challenging product to manage, But like the first thing you would do is just like expose the whole surface area of the tool and be like, all right, here's all the tools. Now go edit it, and you'd probably get not great results. And then you do the process of distilling down like what are the essential capabilities, and then you would get the ability to like add a layer, edit it, whatever. And that might still be too complex. And like the way to make it AI native then is to like distill it down to really just the core stuff as the MCP server of like, okay, when I tell the agent I want it to add this, like these are like the 3 steps that it needs to do in Photoshop, make that into a single tool call for the agent to use. So you kind of need to like co-evolve the like MCP server with the agent.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. And maybe there's also a parallel to that strategy of, maybe there's specific modes that you put Claude or whatever your agent is into where you're just naturally scoping down the tools that it has available. Maybe you've got one that focuses strictly on composition and it's going to handle
Yeah.
helping you crop and just lay out the overall components that are on the on your canvas. It's not going to worry about adding any or removing any or changing their colors. It's
Hmm.
strictly just going to help you organize. And maybe
That's
there's
really interesting.
20 different agents like that, and it you know probably would pair well with some of what you were saying of distilling things down rather than doing a direct one-to-one translation between each click that a user does and an action the agent takes. But I could see that also helping. And they kind of have some of that in Photoshop. You'll see you can toggle between different view styles that cater differently to
Yep.
who's using it. And so there's already kind of a paradigm for that just in the way the UI is displayed to the user. So maybe that comes through on the agent and MCP side as well.
Yeah, huh. I think like some of that has already like just naturally kind of what's the convergent evolution of like I wanted to add a preview mode so that way when I knew that I was having Claude drive that I wasn't like fiddling with what Claude was trying to do. So you get some of that already, which is like this is just I'm just gonna review. I'm just gonna watch Claude work
Mhm.
versus like, okay, now I need to edit, but this should tell me that I'm the mode switch tells me that okay, I shouldn't be giving Claude instructions right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Very interesting. I kinda like that, just getting kind of the preview of it and really scoping things down. And it in my mind fits the overall experience better. I mean, that's what you see in Claude desktop or web when you're working with artifacts, right? Is you kind of get your little chat on the side and you're just seeing,
Yeah.
that's your primary driver for what you're seeing in the preview.
Yeah, I guess I didn't think about that. This is literally the exact same, like, lovable V0 cloud artifacts. This is the same. It's just running on a local app instead of a web app.
Definitely. Well, let's see. Before we wrap up here, could you talk a little bit about what it looks like to train this style of agent? I know you mentioned that you did a couple of training sessions and you can have it cater specifically to your style. What does that look like here?
Yeah. Yeah, the out of the gate, Claude Code is not great at creating thumbnails. Like, maybe it's the lack of the tools or the visual reasoning. And I created the first one. I posted it on Twitter, and I got so many people dunking on it. It was really funny. I made like it's a 15-minute recording. I sped it up 10x to a minute 30 seconds or so, and posted it. It got reposted by the official like Claude Twitter account as well. And there's just a ton of people being like, "Wow, 15 minutes and it's still a shit thumbnail on the other side." So it was good fun. I know, like they're right. It was like a bad thumbnail. And like the next step, there's like, okay, well, we can create a thumbnail. How do we create a better one? And I'm starting to wrap my head around what a training process for agents look like this. And really it's a process. It's like the same as a human learns something as you do it once, you get feedback, and then you like digest, distill, and incorporate that feedback in one way or another. So for Claude, it really looks like the final version of the feedback is updating the claude.md file or wherever else is going to be reading its context from. But the way that I found the most effective way to like get to that level of feedback is to enter like a specific training mode with Claude, and then we would create a thumbnail together. And that training mode, Claude has additional instructions to document its actions, any additional tools it might need, which we can circle back on in a second, and then the feedback that it got. And so in Claude Code, you can define custom slash commands. So I have this start training session, and I'll just pull up the IDE for that real quick. It's really basic to at least kick it off. As I tell Claude that we are doing a new training session, I want it to write out some additional learnings into these files, just some really light notes about like thinking about the tools, the actions, the thinking. I'm telling it, do the best to capture your process. And I'll use that slash command. And then I will say, we're going to work on a thumbnail that looks like this. We'll go through the process. I should have some training notes in here somewhere as well. And we have these training session notes where it's essentially an append only text file. Claude's just writing out a bunch of the process. And then at the end, we go through it and distill it together where I say, hey, Claude, this worked well. This didn't. Can you go back through your notes and see, what you wrote down for that? And then make sure you add that to the Claude doc. So we've only done it a couple times. This doesn't capture all the notes, but it captures the latest ones. And the quality jump from going from like no training sessions to some training sessions is just amazing. Like the first one was like quite bad, and then the next one's like they're acceptable. Like they're a professional grade Mr. Beast thumbnail, but they're quite good. And the training session was only 10 to 15 minutes of us recreating a popular thumbnail that I like the design of on YouTube. And so if I did that 20 or 30 times, maybe it's a half day training Claude on how to do something. Now all of a sudden I have a thumbnail editor that can one-shot an infinite number of thumbnails faster than I could. So I've created like essentially a contractor that has all of the learnings it needs in a half day of work, and I don't have to pay a human. A human might need to like take it to that next level, but in terms of getting a first draft out the door, it's just a lot more efficient.
Yeah, this is a really interesting approach. It's basically, running the agent in meta mode where it can do self-reflection along
Yeah,
the way.
exactly.
Very cool. And that feels fundamentally different than strategies I know we've taken on some of the AI products we've built in the past where it's, run the agent or the LLM, observe outputs and side effects, and try to tune the system prompt just based on your observations of it. But actually having it go through with you and do self critiques along the way, I'm sure that reveals, quite a bit more than, some of the just symptoms we've kind of passively observed through our own previous work.
Yeah, I think the one example of that is centering the text. So the canvas is XY coordinates, and then the text box has a width, and you can have the text left or right, or well, actually at the time it was just text in the box, and you can adjust it all. And I was working with Claude on one of those training sessions, and I just kept telling you like, "Hey, center the text, center the text, center the text." So you're not getting it right. And it raised the flag, it raised the hand and said, "Hey, there's a tool that's missing here. Is you're asking me to do something that I clearly am not able to do. Like I need the environment adjusted in some way." And so what I did then is like, all right, well, we can just make it so that way you can adjust the width of the text box itself, and then you can do a left, center, and right justify. And so giving Claude the chance to provide the feedback to me of like, hey, this is what's missing in the toolkit allowed me to, it was like a one function. It's like a small change, which I also just had Claude implement itself. But now it can center text no problem. Kind of like there. So to put a bow on that thought, which is the training mode here, it's important for Claude to be able to write down notes about what works and what doesn't, and also tell you what it needs. The extension of this thought is I think we're entering a paradigm where this becomes a way to train agents to do things, and having it be able to run locally on your computer is really important for that. So I have some other like Claude agents that are kind of a similar tooling for this. Like I have one that generates PDF documents that I'll use to kind of do an hourly breakdown for a given project. And it's the same thing where it's like a local app. Claude Code has access to it. We've iterated on a number of times. And I'm kind of teaching Claude how to be a project manager for Firstloop and how to articulate what work was done on a given day to our clients. And that process of training the agent on the work is really accessible in Claude Code in a way it's not in other tools.
Yeah, that's very neat. And it also just stray thought, but it makes me wonder how much very similar context, how many times have people gone through this whole training experience with Claude and it's now just lost forever. So it's kind of cool to see this
Yeah.
just being captured in a more intentional way. And maybe this is how every project with Claude should start is through these meta training sessions and just so it can kind of capture these insights and stuff along the way. Cause I think a lot of us tend to just want to move fast and we don't do that work up front and we get
Yeah.
frustrated with the outputs, but just a
Yep.
little bit of effort to capture some of that effort as we collaborate with Claude definitely could just
Yeah.
help.
Fully
Yeah.
agree.
Well, cool. Anything else you wanted to just touch on before we wrapped up here?
You know what? I think that's it. This is a really fun form factor for a project. I think we're going to have more coming down the pipeline that looks like this. Excited to open source the editor at some point, and then also just share more about how to build apps like this and how to train Claude to work well in these apps.
Cool. Well, yeah, thanks for the presentation and thanks for watching, folks. We'll be back next week.
All right. Catch you later, folks.
All right.